Hello, and welcome to the CDO Magazine interview series. I'm Todd Foley with Lydonia. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Nick Ritter, CISO at WorldPay. When you're talking to your peers, or just for the benefit of the listeners here, what advice do you give on um, how you build a strong cybersecurity culture, not just teams, not just programs, but culture across all levels of the organization?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's interesting because every organization that I've been at, it's a little bit different culturally, or a lot different culturally, right? And so, um, I wish I had a playbook on this, um, but what I find is I'm, I'm not a playbook CISO, right? There are CISOs that they walk into an organization new and they're like, "Hey, these are the five things that we're going to focus on for the next year or 2 years or whatever." They kind of they almost have their strategic roadmap built out, and it's the same strategic roadmap that they did in their previous three companies, kind of a thing. And they just kind of go run their playbook, kind of regardless of what the organization is. I'm not like that. Um, I don't do that, which I think in some ways has helped me create longer term sustainable programs, but also has hurt me a little bit in the sense that I might be a slower ramp up CISO than would be typical of the playbook CISO, because I'm trying to discover what it is that I need to do and adapt what I think should be focus areas to the culture and to the strengths and weaknesses of the organization at the time. Really, what I look for is, I mentioned before, cyber hygiene. Like, that is so super important. I really look for, I really look for that. And then I really look for culturally, where's the organization at? Where is the executive team engaged? Is the board engaged in cybersecurity? Are they afraid of it versus are they engaged in it?
Right.
The same thing with the CEO and the CEO direct reports. Are they engaged? Are they afraid of it? What's that look like? What's the culture of the organization? Do they lean in security? Is security a burden? Is it a kind of a speed bump or a brick wall that they keep banging into? And then how do we start breaking down those, and how do we adjust the program to those kind of cultural influences? The other thing I'll mention here is an organization, a CISO or any leader can only go as fast as the organization can follow them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't lap your organization. Um, and that becomes, I think, a big problem, right? CISOs come in and they want to get stuff done. They want to get stuff done very quickly. And they lap the organization. You can't lap your organization. So, yeah, if you look at, there's been a lot of talk recently about like the concept of like alpha males and stuff like that as it relates to wolf packs and stuff like that. It turns out that the concept of the alpha male that was, studied in the 70s or 80s is completely wrong. The leader of the wolf pack in the wild is actually the last wolf in the line, right? Not the first. The first is not. The leader of the pack is the one making sure that nobody falls behind. Right. And so, to a degree, that's got to be kind of where the CISO in the security organization can't go any faster than the pack can go, right? So they have to pace themselves so that you don't lap your organization and change. And because you can really confuse the org by doing that.
I think interesting. I think, we've also seen an evolution of the CISO role, certainly over the years. And it's very likely that it will evolve quite a bit going forward as well. How do you see that evolution? How do you think being a CISO is different today than it was some years back? And where do you think that role is going in the next 3 years, 5 years?
I think it's, um, if I had one phrase to describe it, it would be, um, now you've got to earn your C title. We are called chief executives, um, and we just like the CFO, this chief marketing officer, the chief operating officer. We have chief and officer in our name. We have to earn that now. We're in a spot where I think the inflection point is CISOs now have personal liability in the game. You have a lot more board responsibility. And so because of those things and just the strategic nature, or maybe call it uh the cataclysmic results of security done poorly could have to organizations, right? It could be, you know, for some organizations, security is an existential risk, right? Something goes bad. Like we're a payments company, right? We transact in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 2.7 trillion dollars a year, about 1 billion transactions a week, right? If ransomware locks up our authorization and settlement systems, it probably kills us as a company. It's an existential risk, right? So um, because of that, the CISO is now got a seat at the grown-up executive table, and you're going to have to be a grown-up executive here. And that means that you can't be the senior technical person in the room. You can't be the senior security person in the room. You're going to have to be the executive that is responsible for security. And that means you're going to have to talk about risk in a much more quantified way. You're going to have metrics that measure what are the incremental reductions in risk. You're going to have to spend a lot of time with your board talking about risk appetite and where you are compared to risk appetite, and what's the next investment going to do from a quantifiable risk reduction standpoint. I mean, there's just a lot of executive skills. It's not the senior gearhead in the room anymore. It's an executive position with responsibility for a technical, or potentially technical, remit.
Yeah. And with board liability, everything is a critical discussion, and everything has to have well quantified dollar amounts on it these days.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say that the other part about, being a grown-up executive is every audience is different. You've got to understand your audience. So your executive council may be different than your investors. If you're private equity versus public, you've got to understand that your board may be different. And this is my 4th CISO gig. Every board that I've been in front of has a different personality, a different skill set, a different set of questions. I've never been able to replay one board discussion for another, or come at a board meeting. Okay, this is what I talked about with my last board. This is what this board wants to know. So you're going to have to spend some time figuring out, what do those individual audiences and stakeholders for this particular company and this organization and this construct, what do they want? What do they need? What are they looking for? How can they be satisfied? And so just understanding the board and other executive dynamic is super important.
Well said. So you talked about the evolution in the skills required to be a CISO. What about the next generation of cybersecurity professionals, what skills should they look to develop early on? What's the new path, if you will, for advancing in this space?
I think, I mean, what has served me well, and I think this is, I think it's, what I would say cross generational, though I guess time will tell. Early in your career, become an expert in something. Be the person in the organization who is known for it. In my space, I was, in my organization, I was one of the better incident responders, especially as it went to, analyzing bigger long data. Um, I could I could do that well. That becomes a springboard then for developing all of the other skill sets that you need to be a good leader and ultimately a good executive. So, if I would start earlier in your career, become an expert, then develop leadership skills so that you can lead a team of people and those people enthusiastically follow you, right? And what that means, and then create kind of that strategic layer, like, strategy, vision, capability, to be able to execute on that, develop a vision, develop a strategy, make the incremental decisions you need to do to execute, and then ensure delivery, right? And then the kind of that last piece is that executive awareness and executive development that needs to be done. I think that, if you kind of follow that pattern, I think you'll be pretty successful. Does that guarantee that you'll be a CISO? No, but you'll be incredibly well respected and pretty successful in the field.
I think that's the right path. I think the challenge in that path that I see all too often is people stop at one thing, right? They get their identity wrapped up in being the expert in that one thing, and it kind of prevents them from learning other things or developing additional skills. And I think if you can look at uh, what you do, especially as you're starting out, as a path, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to do this, and that's going to be my identity. You're gonna do well, especially since being an expert is something that, by definition, doesn't last that long these days, right?
Well,
Right.
100%. If you're irreplaceable, you're unpromotable.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Nick, for joining us today. It's been something I've enjoyed tremendously. It's been a great conversation. And for those listening, for more interviews and insights, please visit cdomagazine.tech. And thank you.